Hello, this is Phil Tomzak, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 31st issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And let's start with front page news from the GTA, and the headline on this article is New Mayoral Election Poll Shows a Slip in Support for Brad Bradford with Chris Alexander in the race. And this comes from Ben Cohen, the City Hall Bureau for the Star. The first Toronto mayoral election poll since former MP Chris Alexander entered the race Wednesday shows he has siphoned support from contender Brad Bradford. A telephone survey conducted by Forum Research on Wednesday showed Alexander debuting with the support of 11% of respondents. Mayor Olivia Chow leads with 47%, and Bradford is in second place at 32%, down from 36% in the same poll without Alexander in the mix. This marks a reversal of fortune for Bradford, who is currently councillor for Beach, East York. Recent polls showed that what had been a two-horse race between him and Chow was tightening. A survey released earlier this month by Liaison Strategies had Bradford at 40% support and Chow at 49%. Alexander has never worked at City Hall. He was elected MP for Ajax Pickering in 2011 and served as Minister of Citizenship and Immigration under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper from 2013 to 2015. He stirred controversy when he supported the Conservatives' 2015 election pledge to create a barbaric cultural practices hotline, a proposal that received considerable backlash and drew widespread accusations of racism. Bradford, who has been running to the right of Chow and up until this point escaped having to compete with other challengers for conservative voters, told reporters Wednesday he thinks Alexander is, quote, unfit for office because of the hotline proposal. He also said he hadn't heard of Alexander before he registered for the race. The Forum poll initially asked respondents to choose between Chow, Bradford, and someone else. Then it asked the same people the same question, but provided Alexander as a fourth option. The 11% support Alexander then received pulled 6% from the someone else camp, 4% of support from Bradford, and 1% point from Chow. When Chris Alexander is added to the ballot, Chow's support remains virtually unchanged, while Bradford's support declines, suggesting Alexander draws more heavily from voters seeking an alternative to the mayor, said Forum Research President Lauren Bozinoff. Bozinoff said it is notable that Chow still maintains a commanding lead despite low approval ratings. He said this indicates that while many voters have reservations about her performance, they still see her as the preferred choice for mayor. Overall, 40% of respondents approved of the mayor and 42% disapproved of the job she's doing. The individual issue she fared best on was crime, with 33% approval and 45% disapproval. She polled worst on traffic congestion, with 29% approval against 52% disapproval. Bozinoff said if Alexander maintains this level of support, he's more than likely earned a ticket to debate stages and could be regarded as a serious contender. The first mayoral election debate will be held on August 24th. These results are, quote, exactly what Bradford didn't want, said Bozinoff. The poll used 1,011 randomly selected Toronto residents over the age of 18. Results based on the total sample are considered accurate plus or minus 4.0%, 19 times out of 20. So let's move on to our next front page story. More news from the GTA, and it has the headline, Longtime Toronto Councillor Gord Perks signs off with an ovation, a hug, and cheeky advice. Capitalism is trash. And this is written by Ben Spur, City Hall Bureau Chief for the Star. Toronto City Council members set aside their political differences Thursday to join in a standing ovation for Councillor Gord Perks as he delivered a farewell speech in the chamber. He even got an embrace from an ideological foe. It was a moment of unity in a chamber that is often riven by polarizing debate, and it arrived despite the fact that not all the members applauding have always agreed with Perks, a leader of council's left. During his long tenure at City Hall, much less endorsed the advice with which he ended his remarks. I got it down to 3 words. Capitalism is trash, Perks said, eliciting laughs from most in the room. It was a typically cheeky and typically ideological line from Perks, the councilor for Parkdale High Park, who was first elected in 2006. Over his last 2 decades in office, the former environmental activist has gained the respect, often begrudging, of members across the political spectrum, and a reputation for being a principled, if sometimes prickly, politician. He's also considered the chamber's strongest orator. He announced in April he wouldn't run for re-election this fall. In his speech at the last regular meeting of the term before the October 26th election, he thanked his family, the mayor, the city staff, and his constituents. You silly geese, you elected me 5 times. It's been my privilege, the privilege of a lifetime, really, to represent you, he said. Perks also thanked his fellow councilors, who he said are better at working together than many people think. He noted that most items that go to council pass on consent without debate. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because we all talk to each other, he said. Members do have disagreements, Perks acknowledged, and that's normal. That's us struggling to imagine the world we want. Each of you has taught me a lot about the world that I want, he said. Thank you. After councilors stood applauding his speech, Councilor Stephen Holyday, the conservative Etobicoke Center representative who has often been on the receiving end of Perks' rhetoric, joked that he should have cut his quip about capitalism. Perks beckoned him over and gave him a hug. Councilor Joe Burnside, the conservative-leaning councilor for Don Valley East, gave Perks a brief tribute in which he said he was initially dismayed when he found out he'd be sitting next to him in the chamber. He said he found Perks insufferable when he was de facto leader of the opposition under former Mayor John Tory, with whom Burnside was allied. But the councilor said he came to rely on Perks for voting guidance. He joked that he often voted the opposite of how Perks advised, and the pair became close. I will miss his wit, I will miss his wisdom, Burnside said, turning to Perks, but most of all I will miss your friendship. In our next article, from the front page, but this is provincial politics, and it has the headline, The New Liberal Leadership Candidate Promotes a Rent Freeze and Free Go Transit. And this comes from Rob Ferguson, Queen's Park Bureau. A $22 minimum wage, a rent freeze, and free go transit are on the agenda for housing executive Vikram Handa as he enters Ontario's Liberal leadership race ahead of Friday's 5 p.m. deadline. The bilingual graduate of Oakwood Collegiate in Toronto and the University of British Columbia Law School has been quietly touring the province, gathering ideas for his campaign in the November 21st contest. He faults Premier Doug Ford's government for falling dramatically short on increasing the supply of homes and says he would take the province full speed ahead on building affordable housing, something the New Democrats have also proposed with their Homes Ontario agency. The market will never provide housing at the scale we need, Handa told the Star in an interview Thursday. I don't think subsidizing billionaire developers is going to get us there. A 1-year rent freeze and extending rent controls to units built after 2018 would give time to get affordable housing projects rolling, added Handa, a director of Maya Group, a company that oversees a portfolio of high-rise residential buildings, with half the units at below-market rents subsidized by others at market rates. He previous forayed into electoral politics and was running for the federal Liberal nomination in Davenport in 2014, losing to Julie Zarowich, who was first elected MP a year later. Handa is proposing an increase to a $22 minimum wage. with a 2-year phase-in period to give employers time to adjust, and separate rates as dictated by regional costs of living, so high-cost areas like Toronto would be at $22 and other areas could be lower. The current minimum wage is $17.60, which rises to $17.95 on October 1st with an annual inflation adjustment. Handa said free GO trains and buses would cost about $500 million a year, save money for commuters in dozens of communities, and help get cars off the road, easing gridlock and pollution. Barring any last-minute surprises, he will be one of 6 candidates in the race, 2 of whom have seats in the legislature. MPP Stephanie Bowman, Don Valley East, has also filed her papers with the party after beginning to seriously explore a bid 4 weeks ago when Ajax MPP Rob Surjanic dropped out over a fundraising crunch and personal matters. Bowman was co-chair of his campaign. Stephanie is continuing to grow support, connect with members, and travel the province, spokesman Eric Osborne said on Thursday. An accountant and former bank executive, Bowman recently told the Star her aim is to focus on economic issues such as the high youth unemployment rate under Ford's progressive conservatives. She considered running in the 2023 leadership race, won by former Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, but did not proceed. There are 4 other hopefuls in the leadership contest as the Liberals look to find their way back into government after 8 years as the third-place party in the legislature behind the official opposition NDP under Merritt Stiles. As the Star reported earlier this week, former federal industry minister Navdeep Bains is ahead in fundraising, followed by MPP Lee Fairclough from Etobicoke Lakeshore, former policy advisor Dylan Mirando, and financial technology engineer Eric Lombardi. Now here's our next story from the world of real estate, and this has the headline, "Since Toronto's renoviction bylaw took effect a year ago, calls about such evictions have all but disappeared." And this is written by Manuela Vega, business reporter. 1 year since the City of Toronto implemented a bylaw to prevent bad faith evictions for renovations, tenant lawyers say calls about renovictions have been reduced to nearly zero. The rental renovation license bylaw, effective since July 31st of last year, was brought in to stop so-called renovictions, which is when a landlord misrepresents the need for tenants to move out for renovations, only to move in higher-paying tenants. The bylaw requires landlords seeking eviction for renovations to get a license and compensate tenants forced to move out, among other things. According to the city, it has only received 14 applications and issued 3 licenses so far. Douglas Kwan, Director of Advocacy and Legal Services at the Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, ACTO, said the clinic used to hear often from Toronto tenants about landlords threatening them with eviction over minor repairs or alleged health concerns in order to pressure them to accept money to leave, but those calls have now all but disappeared. The reduction in calls could represent a reversal of what housing advocates have described as a growing trend of landlords using the evictions as a loophole to get around Ontario's rent control laws. In rent-controlled apartments, landlords are limited to how much they can increase rents each year, but can raise rents by any amount for those same units when a tenant moves out. Reports of evictions for renovations ramped up in recent years as rent prices soared, and the gap between potential rents and what tenants were paying grew. At the time the bylaw was introduced, advocates argued many evictions were being done in bad faith, either because the work was never done or the renovations didn't really require the tenant to move out. Some landlords, meanwhile, argued the bylaw could price them out of making renovations and necessary upgrades. But since Toronto's new rules were implemented, several other municipalities, including Mississauga, Guelph, and Kitchener, have created their own bylaws, Kwan noted. It's been tremendously impactful and so important that Canada's largest city took the lead in this, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now back to our article. Bylaw helps determine the need for the vacancy. Under Ontario's Residential Tenancies Act, or RTA, a tenant can be evicted if a landlord intends to do repairs or renovations so extensive they require a building permit and for the unit to be vacant. But the RTA only requires landlords to have obtained or made efforts to obtain any necessary permits, explained Benjamin Rees, Executive Director of South Etobicoke Legal Services. Toronto's bylaw goes further, requiring landlords who give N13S, the eviction notice for renovations, to apply for a license that costs $728 and requires proof of permits and a report from an architect or engineer saying the renovations require the unit to be vacant. The Landlord and Tenant Board, LTB, does not track N13s that landlords have given tenants. Instead, they track landlord applications for a broad range of eviction types that include renovations, so it's impossible to say whether there have been fewer of these eviction notices. But tenant lawyers say certain aspects of Toronto's scheme have been key to the bylaw's success. The bylaw requiring a professional report on vacancy seems to have changed the standard for determining if it's really necessary, Rees said. All the homeowners in Toronto who redo their kitchens and move where the sink is, they need permits, he said, but they're not moving out. Rees believes the biggest driver in reducing renovictions, however, has been the compensation requirement. Both the RTA and the bylaw require landlords to compensate tenants, but the bylaw's rules are more stringent. Under the RTA, a landlord must pay the tenant 3 months of rent if they live in a complex with 5 or more residential units, or 1 month of rent if the complex has fewer than 5 rental units. But under the new bylaw, licensed landlords have to give tenants who wish to return a comparable temporary accommodation the tenant agrees with or rent gap payments for the duration of the renovation. They must also pay tenants a moving fee of either $1,500 or $2,500, depending on the size of their unit. Rees said the monthly payments mean suddenly there's a cost associated with dragging out the work, something bad faith landlords would sometimes do to push long-time tenants to give up their right to return. Many landlords also simply ignored the right to return, tenant advocates say, and brought in new higher-paying tenants. And while the original tenants could file a complaint with the LTB, the board previously ruled it does not have the authority to evict new tenants so that old tenants could move back in. The bylaw also adds landlord licenses to a public registry, which allows renters to confirm their landlord is licensed and track the status of the permit. Pre-bylaw, tenants are left in the dark, Rees said. The bylaw has really put an end to that. The city says it's taking an education-first approach to encourage compliance, but said enforcement could include inspections, orders to comply, or fines up to $100,000. Could the bylaw put off needed repairs? Rose Marie, chair of the Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario, said some landlords have expressed that the costs associated with the rental renovation license make renovations not financially viable. Property owners will, therefore, not make necessary repairs and will let them run derelict, she said, noting some landlords may also leave the industry, leading to less supply and eventually higher prices. Rees, however, said many tenants have been living in bad conditions since before the bylaw, and the city's Rent Safe TO program regularly asks landlords to do repair work that doesn't require eviction or compensation. ACTO's Kwan added the bylaw protects Toronto's existing affordable housing stock. It arrived in time to stem the tide of a trend where several mid-sized investors in Ontario were buying up rental properties and renovicting long-term tenants as part of their business model, he said. The RTA is there to help tenants once the fire has already started burning the house down, Kwan said. But renovation bylaws are the smoke detectors to prevent those fires from beginning in the first place. And our next article, News from Canada, has the headline, "This U of T professor just won math's highest honor and is taking a leave to join OpenAI. Here's why." And this is written by Janet Hurley, senior writer for The Star. A week after accepting the Fields Medal, mathematics' highest honor on the world stage, University of Toronto professor Jacob Simmerman is back in his campus office. His desk is cluttered with papers and books. Advanced topics in computational number theory sits across from Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy. Simmerman himself is a vision of casual academia, khakis and a polo shirt, a far cry from the shiny silver-blue tuxedo he sported in Philadelphia last Thursday while accepting the gold medal for an award widely regarded as the Nobel Prize of Mathematics. He became the first Canadian-based researcher to be so recognized. It's been a bit of a whirlwind since, of interviews and emails, congratulatory messages from old elementary and high school teachers. It's been lovely, says Simmerman, sharing that the medal and $15,000 prize money will be safely tucked away. The bank is going to see a lot of action, he says with a laugh. The medal is beautiful. I don't want to have something so valuable in my home. As he speaks in a space on Huron Street, where he has thought big thoughts and mentored students for nearly 15 years, his gaze is southward. Through the window, the CN Tower in sight. But it's a view he won't hold for long. After conferences and a vacation with his wife and daughter, Simmerman will take a leave and head to San Francisco, where he'll join the safety division of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. The announcement made at a news conference following his Fields win sent ripples. The move follows a year as a distinguished visiting professor at the Institute for Advanced Study in the U.S., but still marks a surprising departure for one of the world's leading mathematicians. In a sit-down with The Star, the 38-year-old Simmerman explains why he is turning to AI, offering a sobering view of the future of mathematics. Question: why is going to OpenAI the next right move? Response: I've been thinking about going into AI safety for a while. It's the most important question of our time, and the timing works for me. I'm wrapping up a bunch of projects, and a bunch of my students are graduating. And in terms of going into AI safety now, these AI models are so good at coding means that the fact I don't have a software engineering background isn't as much of a bottleneck anymore. It's just much quicker for me. I can start running experiments and engaging with it in a way I couldn't even a year ago. Question: what can you accomplish inside OpenAI that you couldn't in academia? In his response, you could, and I'm doing some of it with a great group here. There's other organizations that are independent of academia that I've been talking to as well. I think it's really important to have a healthy ecosystem of people discussing AI safety, because we all ultimately want things to go well. Because the biggest hole in my background is the machine learning, I thought going to a lab made the most sense at this moment. But I want people to go to all of these places. I think everybody going to one place, whatever the place is not the right move. Question: technology companies can offer resources and compensation universities often can't match. Did that influence your decision? Response: I'm in a very fortunate position where I have a lot of good options right now. My main thing was where I could position myself better. It's great that Toronto has been able to keep up so well with so many of the better funded institutions. There's always been a division between private and public sectors. It's a complicated relationship, in some ways competitive, in some ways it's collaborative. Navigating those lines and not becoming too attached to anyone is really important to maintaining a healthy perspective on things. Question: you recently co-authored a paper presenting scenarios where AI leads to catastrophic outcomes for humanity. It's harrowing. Why was it important to write that? Response: a lot of renowned scientists have been warning about risks from AI for a long time. The reason I wrote that paper with Andrew Critch is that even though this has been going on for a long time, I felt there wasn't a visceral story people could engage with in terms of concretely, what are we afraid of here? When you talk at a highbrow level, when you talk at a highbrow level, people rightly ask for the details. They say, you're intellectualizing it. The hope is someone reads these stories and finds one where they connect and say, I can imagine something like this coming to pass. We should be careful about it. The point very much is not fear-mongering or to induce panic, because those aren't helpful, but there are risks in the world, and the way we avoid those risks is by coming at them with clear eyes. Question: while on leave, how will you maintain your association with U of T? Response: my last PhD students are graduating this year, but there's still students that I'm mentoring. I won't be teaching classes for the immediate future, but I'm still involved in conversations on how to keep doing that. Question: you've said AI may soon outperform top mathematicians and change the nature of mathematical research. So what do you say to a grade 12 student who wants to study math at university? Response: pursue your passion. It's really important to invest in yourself and learn to understand the world as it's transforming. The thing I advise against is to hope that the AI buzz goes away and it gets back to business as usual, because I don't think we are getting back to business as usual. Stay on top of what's changing, and things that 10 years ago they would have gone in to learn, like pure math, I now would advise them to take a second look and decide if they want to learn something else or come at it from a different angle. Pay attention to that shift, but definitely don't stop learning or engaging. And the final question: some say we are going into a golden age of mathematics. Your perspective seems more tempered. How do you square that? And his final response: mathematics, in terms of discovering mathematical theories, proving theorems and applying them, I think, is going to enter a golden age. AI systems are going to help us tremendously. We can get results much faster than we could before. The thing I'm saying is that in terms of what people are going to be doing, young mathematicians, they shouldn't expect to have the career that exists today as it exists today. There's a lot of conversation to be had about what will exist, but I think a lot of people are putting hope in the theory that AI systems are doing the easy stuff that's kind of annoying and free us up to do the interesting work. What I think will happen is, unfortunately, no. AI systems will also be doing the interesting work. Our place is going to be more complicated to figure out. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's move on to our next special article from the Life section, and this one has the headline, Nadia Comaneci became a star at the 1976 Montreal Olympics. Now she's back in Canada to be honored. Imagine. And this is written by Leanne Delap, special to the Star. Nadia Comaneci was just 14 when she became the breakout star of the 1976 Montreal Olympics. At 4'11", petite powerhouse, the Romanian gymnast scored a historic perfect 10 on the uneven bars at the Games. The scoreboard was famously unable to display Comaneci's achievement, as it accommodated only a single digit and two fractionals at the time. She later got a tattoo on her leg of the 1.00 that erroneously flashed up on screen that day. This week, at 64, Comaneci returns to Montreal for the 50th anniversary celebrations of the city's big moment in the athletic global spotlight. The impact of her performance there was felt well beyond her sport, into the worlds of celebrity and international politics. But Comaneci wasn't aware of the excitement she was creating at the time. I was competing, minding my routines, hoping I'm doing a good job and not to mess up, Comaneci told the Star by phone just before leaving home for her flight to Montreal. I had no idea about anything going on outside. One of the main things she does remember is everything being free at the Olympic Village, the bounty on offer. That was not something we had ever experienced. It wasn't until she and her teammates got back to Bucharest, where 10,000 people met them at the airport, holding flowers and lining the roads along the way to her hometown of Onesti, 3 hours away, that she realized the magnitude of what she had accomplished. We were asked to put on our medals to step out of the plane, she said. It was an overwhelming experience. When I first saw so many people, I turned around. Still, it was not immediately life-changing for Comaneci. After the games, she went back to life behind the Iron Curtain. Communist bloc athletes were segregated and monitored by their home country's secret police. In a Romania controlled by despot Nicolae Ceausescu, Comaneci endured years of state-enforced surveillance and was banned from international travel. She defected just before the revolution of 1989. Hers is a harrowing saga of creeping across borders in the dead of night. She returned to Montreal, where she spent nearly 2 years in the early 90s living among the Romanian expat community, becoming fluent in both English and French. In the triangle of my history, there is Romania, Canada, and gymnastics, she said. Now she lives in Oklahoma, where she runs a company, Perfect 10 Productions, focused on gymnastics-related content, and co-owns a gymnastics academy with her husband, American gymnast Bart Connor, a gold medalist himself. The pair were married in 1996 in Bucharest in a Romanian Orthodox ceremony broadcast across the finally free country, with a reception hosted by the then president. They share a 20-year-old son, Dylan. When Comaneci returns to Montreal this week, there will be all kinds of celebrations. Ceremonies, plaques, a doctorate from the University of Montreal, she said excitedly. One planned event particularly tickles her. I am meeting 50 Nadias named for me. Hundreds signed up, and they had to cut the line at 50. Imagine! It's not at all hard to imagine. In 1976, the whole world was watching her, rapt. I was a Toronto grade schooler with a dodgy aerial TV, glued to the wide world of sports slow-mo compilations of her routines set to a song called Nadia's Theme that forever became associated with her. It's also the Young and Restless theme song. She was such a childhood inspiration that tears came to my eyes more than once while she told me her story. Comaneci made it feel possible for women to take center stage. Other than a handful of emerging tennis and figure skating heroines, 1970s sports stars were male. There was no equality between women and men, she said, but she wasn't aware of the difference she'd made for a long time. I didn't realize what my teammates and I did until I got the States many years later and began talking to people. One young fan inspired by her achievements was Celine Dion. I had a chance to meet her, said Comaneci, who spent time with the singer at her Vegas show and later met Dion's mom at a TV show taping. Celine told me she thought at the time, if this little girl worked so hard, then I know I can be amazing. Comaneci went on to score 9 perfect tens over 2 Olympiads and take home 9 Olympic medals in her career. But what made her stand out was not just the perfection of her performances, it was the alchemy of her mental toughness, technical skill and artistry, amped up by a certain confidence and flair. Back in the day, all gymnasts had to complete a compulsory program of specific fixed routines. The first time, I realized I can't change anything, she said. There are 8 skills, I thought. What can I do to make mine be better than others? How can I make my impact? Her instinct was to go a little bit bigger with the required moves. I call it the Nadia touch. Gymnastics today is very different. The compulsory routines are gone. The Perfect 10 was abolished in 2006 by the International Gymnastics Federation. Scoring has become more difficult to follow as points are deducted for the tiniest wobbles, and the numbers for difficulty and execution are aggregated in a rather opaque way. It has become very complicated for regular fans of gymnastics, Komenich said diplomatically. Some things are much improved. The equipment is so much better, she said. The mats in my day were so hard I would feel it in my brain. She was discovered at age 6 by her former coach, Bela Karolyi, who became a polarizing figure for his strict methods of dieting and corporal discipline. Another point of controversy, convicted sex offender Larry Nassar regularly worked at Karolyi Ranch training facility in Texas in his capacity as a doctor for Team USA. After Karolyi died in 2024, both Komenich and another star gymnast, Mary Lou Retton, spoke about his positive impact on their careers. Komenich has channeled her energy into supporting athletes in North America and Romania, offering advice and perspective in her 2003 book, Letters to a Young Gymnast, and serving as vice chairperson of the board of directors of Special Olympics International, among other roles. At the end of our conversation, Komenich, ever the mentor, called me back to make sure to voice her congratulations to Canadian gymnast Ellie Black on her historic second all-around title at the Commonwealth Games this week. The Montreal anniversary celebrations may honor Komenich's firsts, but 50 years later, she remains a vital part of the ever-evolving athletic community. And let's move on to our next news story. It has the headline, Dessert sold at Costco in Canada has been recalled. And written by Evelyn Harford, reporter. Certain lots of Alpha croissants sold at Costco business centers and online have been recalled due to the potential presence of mold. Please do not consume, serve, use, sell, or distribute the Alpha croissants that are being recalled, said a voluntary recall notice from Distribution MFG Incorporated, posted on Costco.ca. The food recall? Alpha croissants. The recalled croissants were sold at Costco Business Center or on CostcoBusinessCenter.ca between June 2026 and July 2026. The product? Alpha croissants with cocoa cream filling. 24 count. The lot codes 10726, 08626, Costco item number 2077888. How to report an issue with a consumer product, drug, cannabis, or food. You can report a food concern or complaint to CFIA online. Consumers can report any health or safety incidents related to the use of products by filling out a Consumer Product Incident Report form. To report a health or safety complaint with a cannabis product, fill out the cannabis reporting form online. Report any drug or health product side effects or complaints to Health Canada. You can check for more recall notices published by Health Canada and CFIA online. Let's move on now to the world of entertainment. We have an opinion piece from Vinay Menon, entertainment columnist, and it has the headline, Where is Mitch McConnell? How the Republicans' disappearance sparked a pop culture mystery. Missing person posters went up this week in Washington. Senator Mitch McConnell is now getting the D.B. Cooper treatment as politics increasingly blends into pop culture. Late-night jokes, satirical musicals, TikToks alleging to have found the vanished Politico who is described in the poster as 84 years old, 5'9", turtle-like. The mystery and conspiracy theory started on June 14th. McConnell fell inside his home. An ambulance was dispatched. CPR was performed. Then the narrative got as fuzzy as an alpaca as the speculation swirled inside a zero-info vortex. Mitch is alive. Mitch is dead. Mitch is in a vegetative state. Mitch is sharp as a thumbtack and having 20-minute chats with CNN's Scott Jennings. Mitch is plotting a coup d'etat. Mitch is in a coma. Mitch is in rehab. Mitch is learning Mandarin on Duolingo so he can ask wife Elaine Chao why she didn't immediately rush home from a China trip after his emergency. Curiously, Donald Trump went radio silent as the mystery deepened. And this is a guy who has strong opinions about the Grammys and robot vacuums. What does Trump know? Why won't he share? McConnell's office did release 2 proof-of-life photos. In the first, on July 12th, Mitch is sitting up in bed as his wife rests her arm across the rail. Instead of a hospital gown, he's wearing a red gingham shirt. He's holding a copy of the day's Washington Post sports section, as if his captors wanted to timestamp verification, their hostage while still among the living. But the photo only poured more gasoline on the conspiratorial flames. As Jimmy Fallon joked, nothing says perfect health like having someone hold you up when you're already sitting. Looks like a husband and wife ventriloquist act. Whatever you think of McConnell's ruthless politics, we've turned a human being into a ghoulish punchline. Can you imagine the episode plot if South Park was currently on the air? McConnell might as well be the protagonist in Gone Girl. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear called upon McConnell to prove he's alive or resign. How can he resign if he's dead? And now we have AI milk cartons and street art as people casually wonder if McConnell's body is floating in liquid nitrogen in a cryogenic dewar, or if it was turned over to MAGA taxidermists who plan to immortalize him in a hands-over-head pose with tongue wagging out to scare the next Democrat president. McConnell's Houdini Act should be grounds for serious conversations on both sides of the border about medical transparency, term limits, and the right of taxpayers to know if their elected leaders are babbling in purgatory. Officially, McConnell is currently receiving intense physio with plans to return to his first love, which is obstructing democracy. It's the unofficially that has powered nearly 2 months of a future Netflix doc. If he allegedly had a substantive talk with Jennings weeks ago, what is stopping McConnell from filming a brief message today? Hello, everyone. I am alive. That's all you need to do. Instead, Team Mitch's bewildering silence has only turned him into a tortoiseshell Amelia Earhart this summer as cameras and boom mics trail his colleagues in search of an explanation, and the unnatural void gets filled with sci-fi plots and Weekend at Bernie's gags. When institutions slither into an opaque muck, the internet will spitball hot takes in Comic Sans. On Thursday afternoon, the lead story on the Daily Beast, Elaine Chao sparks new Mitch mystery with bizarre appearance. A montage of 4 images from July 12th, 15th, 27th, and 28th showed McConnell's wife with slightly different hairdos, presumably to question the authenticity of those proof-of-life images. The senator's wife's hair is at the center of this mystery. Is it? Chao received an award this week, and maybe she asked her stylist for highlights. Logically, if she was part of a diabolical cover-up, would she go to an award banquet? Wouldn't she be huddled with lawyers in a GOP lair as John Thune sips a lime Ricky and thinks aloud, "We wait as long as we can. Then we say Mitch was abducted by Iran." Nobody needs to see a live feed of Mark Carney getting a colonoscopy. But if there are any red flags during his next physical, it would be good to know. That's all. Does he have a heart murmur? Hypertension? Is he physically fit to navigate tariffs and threats to our sovereignty? Surely there is a way to balance medical privacy and the public interest so mysterious disappearances don't turn our leaders into reality show contestants. Baseball has an IL, so fans know when an injured player is expected to return. I know more about Addison Barger's health than I do about my own. Politics needs an IL. Mitch McConnell, right outfielder. Aphasia, concussion, glitching, out for 60 days or the season, pending further testing. Where have you gone, D.B. Cooper? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. More from the world of entertainment. The headline, "This Toronto fan has seen the Odyssey 10 times and counting," as moviegoers pack theaters to see the 3-hour epic. And this comes from culture reporter David Friend. Rita Sue is the first to admit she's gone a little overboard with Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Since the film's theatrical debut in mid-July, she's watched the nearly 3-hour epic 10 times. She attended Toronto's first sold-out IMAX 70mm screening and has the oversized commemorative ticket to prove it, before returning to see it again in nearly every format available: IMAX Digital, standard 70mm, and even 4DX, complete with wind, water, and motion effects. She jokingly calls the habit Odyssey maxing, borrowing from the internet slang looks maxing to describe her quest to experience Nolan's latest film in every way possible. She figures she will stop at 13 screenings, one more than Nolan once said he watched the original Star Wars in theaters. "I wasn't around when Star Wars or 2001 A Space Odyssey first came out," the 44-year-old film and TV producer told the Star, "but I feel like in those times I would be doing something like this." Sue is one of many moviegoers across the world squeezing in repeat viewings of The Odyssey, some even trekking hundreds of kilometers for the chance to see it in IMAX 70mm, the celluloid format Nolan has long championed. For her and many others, repeat viewings are not simply about seeing the film again. They're about experiencing the best possible version. What separates The Odyssey from other box office hits isn't just the film, it's the scarcity of the ultimate IMAX 70mm format. Cinephiles say that version delivers greater depth and texture than digital projection while taking full advantage of the wider IMAX frame. Only 9 celluloid IMAX projectors are showing The Odyssey in Canada, out of just 41 across the world. The aging machines require emergency repairs and frequent maintenance by trained projectionists. Nolan films have long been treated as cultural events. His 2023 biopic, Oppenheimer, helped spark Barbenheimer, the viral movie-going trend that saw audiences pair it with Greta Gerwig's Barbie, after the two blockbusters opened on the same weekend. But the director's latest sprawling adventure has inspired a different kind of devotion, one more often associated with concerts or major sporting events. That rarity has made IMAX 70mm screenings feel like special engagements, with moviegoers paying a premium price of about $30 a ticket and planning weeks in advance to secure a seat. Cineplex says it has heard from moviegoers as far away as the United Kingdom seeking tickets for its IMAX 70mm screenings. On Thursday, the theater chain opened additional showtimes in Vaughan and Mississauga through September 16th, a rare extension of The Odyssey into its third month on IMAX screens. "The sound is phenomenal. The visuals are grand. This is stuff you don't see every day," said Rob Gage, another repeat viewer of the Nolan epic who has tickets for his third viewing next month. "We've got a pretty good setup at home, but for me, there's nothing like having that shared experience with a bunch of strangers." Even before the breakdown, demand had fueled a thriving resale market. On eBay this week, one ticket to a Vaughan IMAX 70mm screening was listed for $400, while a pair of center seats for an August show was priced at about $300. Fortunately for moviegoers shut out of IMAX 70mm screenings, there are other ways to see the film, including on regular celluloid 70mm screenings at cinemas such as the Varsity. Cineplex's Ultra AVX auditoriums project the film on wall-to-wall screens in 4K resolution. Most also feature Dolby Atmos surround sound, with up to 60 audio channels that create the sensation of being surrounded by the action. It's not the wider IMAX presentation, but more casual moviegoers may not notice the difference. There's also the 4DX sensory experience at Cineplex's Young and Dundas Cinema, which has drawn attention on social media for its intensity. Seats shake, vibrate, and pivot with the action in the film, which is especially impactful during moments on the high seas. Flashing lights mimic thunderstorms, ceiling fans simulate ocean winds, and bursts of air from the headrests make it feel as though arrows are whizzing past the audience's ears. Frances Prekidney had no interest in chasing the ultimate format. While visiting Toronto from cottage country, she and her partner originally planned to see the film in IMAX 70mm, but settled on an IMAX digital screening at the Scotiabank Theatre after the other sold out. We wear hearing aids, but we didn't bring them because we knew it was going to be loud, she said. Quite frankly, I think I would have enjoyed it just as much on a regular screen. Time for relationships advice from Lisi. This comes from Lisi Tesher, advice columnist. In today's column, my friend is rich. I planned a cheap and cheerful vacation for us. Will she hate it? Let's ask Lisi. Here's our question from a reader. I have a very good friend who lives in another province. We met when we were kids at summer camp and kept in touch for many years. We lost touch, but for no reason. When we found each other again just a few years ago, we were both over the moon, and now we talk all the time. Unfortunately, we lead very disparate lives and have very opposing lifestyles. Where I work an intense full-day shift, she works from home, setting her own schedule, and still makes twice as much money as I do, if not more. So when she picks up the phone to chat, she's able to talk for ages. I'm almost always the one saying I have to go. I have a week's vacation later this summer, and I've invited her to join me on a road trip to Long Island, New York, where there's a cute bed and breakfast I've been to many times before. It's cheap, clean, and very cheerful. She's agreed to come, but now I'm afraid she'll hate it and we'll have a terrible time. What do I do? Signed, Different Strokes. And here's Lisi's answer. Manage your expectations of her and give her the full rundown so she can manage her expectations of the place you chose. Be very clear this place is inexpensive, which fits your budget, but clean and cute. Send her a website, a link to their Instagram page, or even just some photos from your past stays. Then plan some fun stuff to do and talk about on your road trip. Be silly and make every day a theme day, or play 20 questions, or tell her to create the best playlist from your childhood and you'll do the same. The goal is to have fun and enjoy each other's company. No one should be expected to change or mold to the other. And our next question from a reader. Last week, my mother called every day giving me bad news about someone else in her friend group. One died, one was in hospital dying, one was just diagnosed with cancer, one fell and broke her hip, and one's husband had a heart attack and dropped dead. An absolutely horrific week. And yes, every person I mentioned is in a worse place than my mother at this moment, but I'm very worried she's going to break. That's a lot of bad news for a person of her age to handle. How can I help her through this very tough time? Signed, Too Much. And Lisi's answer, that is indeed a lot of very terrible news for anyone to have to bear. I'm so sorry for your mom and the losses she is suffering. There are a few things I would suggest doing to help her through this time. Go and spend some time with her and let her talk about each person who you mentioned earlier. Discuss how she would like to deal with each situation. For example, would she like to attend the funeral? Does she need or want you to accompany her? Would she like to visit her friend in hospital before that person dies? Does she need or want you to accompany her there, too? What would she like to do for the person with cancer and the person with the broken hip? And how does she feel she can support the new widow? Look at your calendar and hers and pencil in when and where you can help. Remind her, though, these are all her friends. She is not suffering, and she needs to be there to support them as best she can. Depending on your mom's physical and mental health, help her do all the things she wants to do for her people. And if she just needs a shoulder to cry on, be there for her. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 31st issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Phil Tomczak. Thank you for listening.